Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining me on this edition of the Huddle Hour. Hey, the wide receiver room for the Pittsburgh Steelers went from decent to not great, and I will get into that here in this video in a little bit. But before I do, if you guys like this content, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button, and let's just dive right into it. So obviously, by now, everybody has kind of heard what is going on with Diontae Johnson. Obviously, there's reports out that the Pittsburgh Steelers are willing to move on from him for the right price. And that was something I don't think a lot of Pittsburgh Steelers fans were really kind of thinking about going into this year. But let's not forget, he's going into the last year of his contract. Whether Pittsburgh kind of put that out to begin with, or it came from Diontae Johnson's camp, is still yet to be seen. But I think from a non-biased perspective, I could definitely see why Diontae Johnson wants to get out of town. Obviously, with some of the injuries, you can't really help itself. But the poor quarterback play going into a contract year at the age of 27, he's in line for one more big contract. And so, do you want to be able to try to get yourself to, let's say, a Kansas City, Buffalo, who knows, Houston, San Francisco, depending on what happens with Brandon Ayuk, or do you want to stay all who have, good, if not great quarterback positions, or do you want to stay in Pittsburgh with Kenny Pickett and try to relive the year that we just had? But from Pittsburgh's side of things, it's in the last year of his contract. Do you want to pay a good but not great receiver? Obviously, top-rated receiver money. He's probably going to demand, I would say, anywhere from probably $13 to $14 to $18 million, depending on what type of production he's able to provide this year. Or do you decide to trade him going into the draft, which would obviously allow you to get some draft capital back, and try to either recoup his production from a rookie. But in this video, I really wanted to kind of dive into a whole bunch of different options. So obviously this video, it kind of centers around Diontae Johnson and what could potentially happen with him. But the article I wanted to share with you guys is in regards to Allen Robinson. Steelers are reported to wanting him back under the right conditions. Now, what conditions are you talking about? Well, that all stems from when they traded for him from LA. They traded him in a 7th rounder for a 7th rounder, basically, but they decided to take on the last 2 years of his $46.5 million contract. And so this year he stands to count for almost $12 million against the cap. And there's potential to be able to get out a lot of that dead money if you do release him. And so really what it comes down to is they're willing to bring him back. They value, like the article said, the Steelers value his veteran presence, even though he didn't really account for much production this past season. But if he can come back on the right deal, and then let's say Diontae Johnson does decide to leave, where are our options at moving forward? Now, if we look into free agency, let's just start there, right? If we go to the top 10 wide receivers that are potentially available, you got T. Higgins, franchise tags. Pittman Jr. from Indianapolis, just franchise tagged. Mike Evans reported is going to go back to Tampa Bay. Marquise Brown, do we really want to go down that route? I don't know. And quite frankly, I don't think that that's really the option that we want to go with, because I think there's better options out there. Number 5, Calvin Ridley. Interesting idea. I do think that, knowing that Arthur Smith is going to come in when he had his best offensive years as an offensive coordinator for Tennessee, they did play action, throw the ball down the field. We have the running backs in Najee Harris and Warren to be able to do that. Our offensive line is getting better. And quite frankly, that's probably going to be the best way to kind of rejuvenate this offense is, can we go down the field? We've got George Pickens. Do we keep Allen Robinson around as kind of that, wide receiver 2, potentially could go downfield, but really he's more of that 10 to 15, 20-yard guy. Calvin Ridley kind of is a mixture of both. He could go deep, but he also can run those shorter routes. Now, if we go down to a tier below, Darnell Mooney from Chicago. I don't hate that option. The option that I really do like, if we want to go big, and then, get a little shifty receiver, I'll get into that here in a second because I think this opportunity could be huge. But let's say Gabriel Davis from Buffalo. Does he not go back to Buffalo? That could be huge. Odell Beckham Jr., I don't think is going to come to Pittsburgh. The point that he's at in his career, he wants to be in a let's go to the Super Bowl this year. He tried it with Baltimore. Realistically, he probably is going to go back. Tyler Boyd, the forgotten receiver from Cincinnati. Could he be a good step in? That would allow George Pickens to go into that number one wide receiver slot. Curtis Samuel, if you want to try to maybe go with a bigger receiver in the draft, Curtis Samuel would be a good kind of slot scat receiver. Kendrick Bourne is the 11th rated receiver in what article am I reading here? Oh, PFF. Not really a huge fan of him. DJ Chark, another down the field stretch guy. If Arthur Smith wants to run play action, he would be a great opportunity or option for that. Injury concerns are a huge deal. Michael Thomas, not a huge fan. Josh Reynolds, now as a Lions fan, Josh Reynolds did a lot of good things as a de facto number 2, number 3 receiver. I don't think that would be a huge bad pickup if you're, from the Steelers' perspective, if you are looking to get rid of Diontae Johnson and kind of moving on. Now, if we go into the draft, now it was reported this last weekend in the combine, the Steelers talked and interviewed a lot of the receiver crop that was in Indianapolis. Now, with the amount of holes that the Steelers have on defense, little surprising because receiver really wasn't talked about up until the last couple days. But let's take a look at the receiver class. Obviously, you've got Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Roma Duzier, basically on the big board, top 10. Those, unless Steelers trade up, which I don't think is going to happen, those guys are probably going to be off the board. But now we go down to the 4th guy. Now, I've seen reports, depending on which news article that you're reading, where does Pittsburgh go in the draft? Do they go defense? Obviously, they've been interviewing a lot of the receivers at the draft. So could they go from, to the receiver standpoint? Well, on the big board, number 21, you got Brian Thompson Jr. at LSU. Now, he is one of a handful of burners that came out of this draft. He did test pretty well, I think, in Indianapolis, but he was a major reason why LSU led the NCAA in passing efficiency, yards per attempt. Now, his route running is not as great as Neighbors, but he was a good number 2 at LSU. And we saw the last time that LSU had a couple studs come out, Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and that's turned out to be phenomenal. Troy Franklin out of Oregon, ranked as the number 26th. He could be there at the end of the first round. Now, this is when I kind of preluded earlier, you go get Gabe Davis, another big body receiver. What about Lan McConkey out of Georgia? He's rated on the big board as 31, and I feel like in the last 2 years, his draft stock has just skyrocketed. Obviously, he's had some really big catches in some big games, but he is a unique talent that could play the slot receiver because he kind of breaks through on that stereotype. He's not just this shifty, slot guy. He has the ability to stretch the field, which also plays into Arthur Smith's, wanting to play action, down the field. Devontae Walker out of North Carolina. Now, this is another one because Keon Coleman has been dropping. He's number 8 from receivers down to 39. So you're looking at, realistically, depending on how the draft shakes out, early second, mid-second round off of PFF. But what if you go get a slot veteran guy to kind of be that safety blanket for whoever's playing quarterback, and then you go and get Keon Coleman, who, as a Michigan State fan, sad to see him leave. I'm glad he did good down in Florida State. That's interesting. Dante Mitchell, Xavier Levitt. If you want to go a little bit later, you got Worthy, the speedster out of Texas. So I think there's a lot of different options. And now I know I was, obviously before you make a video like this, I get it. The fan base is divided on, do we get rid of Diontae Johnson or do we keep him? But I think there's enough talent in the wide receiver pool, both in free agency and in the draft, that if you can get draft capital, get something back for him, realistically, maybe a second or a third rounder, and then refill that void that you're leaving. But then not be in the potential liability of not being able to re-sign him if he decides to re-sign with Pittsburgh after his contract year is up. But let me know what you guys think. I know this could be a divisive topic. Obviously, Diontae Johnson is a fan favorite. I have him on my fantasy football team, and it's quite frankly, it's a disappointment every year. But I don't think that's because of the lack of talent that he has. It's more from the quarterback play. But I'm interested to see what you guys think in regards to what you guys think the Steelers should do when it comes to the receivers position as we go into 2024. But if you guys like this content, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. And until next time, guys, have a good one.